I knew something was wrong the moment I saw Patricia Henderson marching across my front lawn with a manila folder clutched against her chest, like it contained evidence of war crimes. It was a Tuesday morning in early March, and I had just finished my coffee when I spotted her through the kitchen window of my house in Scottsdale, Arizona. Patricia was the president of the Saguaro Springs Homeowners Association, a position she wielded like a medieval monarch ruling over peasants. She was 53 years old, had the kind of haircut that screamed, "I want to speak to your manager," and wore pearl earrings even when she was supposedly just out for a casual walk. Nothing about Patricia Henderson was ever casual. My name is Robert Thompson, and I had lived in this neighborhood for 8 years without major incident. I worked as an IT consultant for several manufacturing companies in the Phoenix area, which meant I spent a lot of time troubleshooting equipment issues and managing server installations. It was good work, steady income, and it allowed me to afford a decent 3-bedroom house in a neighborhood that was supposedly nice and quiet. The key word there being supposedly. I watched Patricia's determined stride and considered pretending I was not home, but my truck was parked in the driveway and she had definitely seen me through the window. There was no escape. The doorbell rang 3 times in rapid succession. Patricia was not a patient woman. I opened the door and tried to smile. "Morning, Patricia. What can I do for you?" She did not return the smile. Instead, she opened the manila folder and pulled out a printed document with several photographs attached. "Mr. Thompson, we need to discuss a serious violation of our community covenants, conditions, and restrictions." My stomach dropped. I had a pretty good idea where this was going, but I played dumb. "A violation? What kind of violation?" Patricia thrust the papers toward me. The photographs showed my backyard, specifically the shed I had built 6 months ago. It was a solid structure, 12 feet by 16 feet, with proper roofing and a concrete foundation. I had built it myself over several weekends, and I was proud of the work. The shed housed thousands of dollars worth of equipment that I used for my consulting work. Servers, networking hardware, diagnostic tools, backup generators, and various other expensive electronics that my clients needed me to maintain and deploy. "This structure," Patricia said, jabbing her finger at the photograph, "was erected without HOA approval. According to Section 12, Subsection 4 of our CC and Articles, any outbuilding or structure exceeding 100 square feet requires written approval from the Architectural Review Committee before construction begins." I had read those CC and Articles when I bought the house. I had also checked the county building codes and obtained the proper permits from the city of Scottsdale. I got all my permits from the city. Everything is up to code. "City permits are not the same as HOA approval," Patricia said, her voice taking on that patronizing tone that made my teeth clench. "The HOA has specific aesthetic and structural requirements that supersede basic city codes. You should have submitted your plans to us first." "Patricia, I need that shed. I have over $50,000 worth of equipment in there. Servers, networking gear, diagnostic equipment. I cannot just keep all that in my garage. I need climate control, proper ventilation, dedicated power lines. That shed is essential for my business." She crossed her arms. "That is not the HOA's concern, Mr. Thompson. The rules exist for everyone, and they must be followed. I am formally notifying you that you have 30 days to remove the structure or face escalating fines of $100 per day until compliance is achieved." 30 days. Patricia, be reasonable. Where am I supposed to put all that equipment? Again, not the HOA's concern. You should have thought of that before you built an unauthorized structure. Good day, Mr. Thompson. She turned on her heel and walked back across my lawn, leaving me standing in the doorway with the violation notice in my hand. I looked down at the papers and felt anger bubbling up in my chest. This was ridiculous. The shed was in my backyard, barely visible from the street, and it was not hurting anyone. But I knew from experience that arguing with Patricia Henderson was like arguing with a brick wall. The woman was relentless. I spent the rest of the day researching my options. I called my lawyer, a guy named Marcus Chen who had helped me with my business contracts in the past. He listened to my situation and then delivered the bad news. Rob, HOAs in Arizona have pretty broad authority. If your CC and Articus say you need approval for structures over 100 square feet and you did not get that approval, they can enforce it. You could fight it, but it would be expensive and time-consuming, and there is no guarantee you would win. So what do I do? You could try appealing to the HOA board directly. Request a variance or retroactive approval. Show them why the shed is necessary and how it benefits the community. Maybe they will be reasonable. I almost laughed at the word reasonable in connection with Patricia Henderson, but I agreed to try. Marcus helped me draft a formal request for variance, complete with photographs of the shed, documentation of its construction quality, an explanation of the business need, and statements from my immediate neighbors saying they had no objections to the structure. 2 weeks later, I received the HOA board's response. Request denied. No explanation, no discussion, just a flat denial and a reminder that I now had 2 weeks left to remove the shed or face daily fines. I tried calling Patricia directly. She did not answer, so I left a voicemail explaining the situation again, emphasizing the cost of the equipment and the impracticality of removing the shed. She called back 2 days later. Mr. Thompson, the board has made its decision. We cannot make exceptions just because you claim to have expensive equipment. For all we know, you are exaggerating to gain sympathy. The shed must go. Patricia, I can show you the equipment. I can show you the invoices. This is not an exaggeration. I have servers in there that cost $8,000 each. Networking equipment worth $15,000. Diagnostic tools worth another $20,000. This is real, legitimate business equipment that I need for my work. Then perhaps you should rent commercial space like any other business owner would. I work from home. That is the whole point. My clients expect me to have equipment ready to deploy on short notice. I cannot be driving across town to some storage unit every time I need to grab a server. Not my problem, Mr. Thompson. You have 12 days. She hung up. I sat in my home office staring at the phone and trying to figure out what to do. Moving all that equipment was not just inconvenient, it was potentially dangerous. Some of the servers contained sensitive client data. The environmental controls in the shed kept everything at optimal temperature and humidity. If I had to dismantle everything and move it somewhere temporary, I risked damaging equipment and losing data. My clients trusted me to maintain their systems properly. This was not just about my convenience. It was about my professional reputation and my ability to do my job. But Patricia Henderson did not care about any of that. The 30-day deadline arrived on a Wednesday. I had not removed the shed. At 7 in the morning, my doorbell rang. It was Patricia again, this time with another board member, a guy named Donald Pritchard, who always looked vaguely uncomfortable whenever Patricia was around. Mr. Thompson, Patricia said, not waiting for me to invite them in. As of today, you are in violation and subject to daily fines of $100. Additionally, the HOA is within its rights to place a lien on your property if these fines remain unpaid. I strongly suggest you begin demolition immediately. Patricia, please, can we discuss this reasonably? I am willing to make modifications to the shed if there are aesthetic concerns. I can paint it, add different roofing, whatever you want, but I cannot just tear it down. Donald shifted his weight and cleared his throat. Mr. Thompson, have you considered just applying for approval now? Maybe if you go through the formal process, even after the fact, the board might be willing to work with you. Patricia shot him a look that could have melted steel. The time for applications has passed, Donald. Mr. Thompson built this structure in flagrant violation of our rules. Approving it now would set a dangerous precedent. What precedent? I asked. That the HOA is willing to work with homeowners instead of being needlessly punitive. I resent that characterization, Patricia said, her voice icy. We are simply enforcing the rules that everyone agreed to follow when they purchased homes in this community. If we let you get away with this, what is to stop every homeowner from building whatever they want without permission? Common sense, I suggested. The fact that most people are not trying to circumvent the rules, they are just trying to live their lives and run their businesses. This conversation is over. You have been warned. Demolition must begin immediately or the fines will continue to accrue. Good day. They left, and I stood there feeling helpless and furious. $100 a day. That was $3,000 a month. I could not afford to just let those fines pile up indefinitely, but I also could not afford to move all my equipment on such short notice. I called Marcus again. He listened to the latest development and sighed. Rob, at this point, your options are limited. You can pay the fines and remove the shed. You can pay the fines and fight for a variance in court, or you can ignore the whole thing and let them place a lien on your property, which would be a disaster. None of these are great options. There has to be something I can do. There is one possibility. If you can demonstrate that removing the shed would cause significant hardship, and that the HOA is being unreasonable in denying your variance, you might be able to get an injunction to stop the fines while you pursue legal action. But that is a long shot, and it would still cost you legal fees. How much are we talking? Probably $5,000 to $10,000 minimum, and that is just to get the injunction and start the process. If it goes to actual litigation, you are looking at a lot more. I did the math in my head. Pay the fines for a few months while fighting this thing, plus legal fees, and I could be out $20,000 or $30,000 with no guarantee of success. But if I just caved and removed the shed, I would have to find somewhere else to store my equipment, which would probably cost me in rental fees and lost business anyway. I was trapped, and Patricia Henderson knew it. The fines started piling up. $100 a day, every day. After a week, I received a formal invoice from the HOA for $700. After 2 weeks, another invoice for $1,400 total. Patricia was meticulous about the paperwork. I had to give her that. Meanwhile, I started researching commercial storage options. I found a climate-controlled facility in Temp that could accommodate my equipment, but the monthly rent was $800, and it was a 30-minute drive from my house. That meant any time a client needed emergency support, I would have to factor in travel time. It was going to hurt my business, but I was running out of options. Then, on a Friday afternoon 3 weeks after the fine started, I got a call from one of my biggest clients, a manufacturing company called Precision Dynamics based in Mesa. The operations manager, a woman named Linda Garrett, sounded stressed. Rob, we have a major problem. Our primary server just went down and we have a production line sitting idle. We need you here as soon as possible with a backup server to get us running again. How fast can you get here? Under normal circumstances, I would have said 30 minutes. I would have grabbed the appropriate server from my shed, loaded it in my truck, and been on my way. But now, Things were complicated. "Linda, I can be there in about an hour. I have to make a stop first to pick up the equipment." An hour. "Rob, every minute costs us thousands of dollars in lost production. What is going on?" I explained the situation as briefly as I could. Linda was silent for a moment. "You are telling me that your HOA is preventing you from doing your job?" "Essentially, yes." "That is insane." "Look, Rob, I need that server here as fast as you can manage. But after we get this crisis handled, I think we need to have a conversation about this HOA situation. This affects our business relationship, and I am not happy about it." Her tone made it clear that "not happy" was an understatement. I promised to get there as quickly as possible, then rushed to the storage facility in Temp, grabbed the server I needed, and drove like hell to Mesa. By the time I arrived at Precision Dynamics, 90 minutes had passed since Linda's call. She met me in the parking lot and her expression was not friendly. "90 minutes, Rob. That is unacceptable." "I know, Linda. I am so sorry. This HOA thing has thrown everything into chaos. We got the server installed and the production line back up, but the damage was done." Linda pulled me aside before I left. "Rob, you have been a great contractor for us, but we need reliability. If you cannot guarantee response times anymore, we might have to start looking at other options. I am not trying to be harsh, but we have our own business to think about." I drove home feeling sick. Precision Dynamics was one of my biggest clients, accounting for about 30% of my annual revenue. If I lost them because of this HOA nonsense, it would be a financial catastrophe. That evening, I sat down and wrote a detailed email to the entire HOA board, copying Patricia Henderson and every other board member. I explained the situation with Precision Dynamics, the impact the shed removal was having on my business, and the potential consequences if I lost clients because of this enforcement action. I pleaded with them to reconsider, to grant a variance, to find some kind of compromise. Patricia responded the next morning. Her email was brief. "Mr. Thompson, the board's decision stands. Personal business concerns do not override community rules. Please remit payment for the outstanding fines, which now total $2,100. I wanted to throw my computer through the window. Instead, I called Marcus again and told him to file for the injunction. If Patricia wanted a fight, I would give her one. Marcus got to work on the paperwork, and within a week, we had a court date scheduled for a hearing on the injunction request. The hearing was set for mid-May, about 6 weeks away. In the meantime, the fines continued to accrue, and I continued to struggle with the logistics of having my equipment stored off-site. I lost 2 more emergency service calls because of delayed response times. Precision Dynamics had not fired me yet, but I could feel the relationship deteriorating. Another client, a smaller company called Tech Core Solutions, actually did drop me, saying they needed a contractor who could respond more quickly to urgent issues. My income was taking a hit, my stress levels were through the roof, and Patricia Henderson seemed to be enjoying every minute of it. The court hearing finally arrived on a Tuesday morning in mid-May. I met Marcus at the Maricopa County Superior Court building in downtown Phoenix. We were scheduled before Judge Margaret Cassidy, a no-nonsense woman in her early 60s who had a reputation for being fair but firm. Patricia showed up with the HOA's lawyer, a guy named Gregory Foster who looked like he had just graduated from law school. He was young, nervous, and clearly unprepared for the level of detail that Marcus had put into our case. Marcus had compiled a binder full of evidence, photographs of the shed, documentation of its construction quality, copies of the city permits, statements from neighbors, financial records showing the value of the equipment, client contracts demonstrating the business necessity, and even emails from Precision Dynamics and Tech Core Solutions explaining how the HOA's actions were affecting my ability to serve them. Gregory Foster had a copy of the CC and Articus, and a condescending attitude. Judge Cassidy called the hearing to order and asked Marcus to present our case. He walked through everything methodically, explaining that I had built the shed in good faith, believing that city permits were sufficient, and that the HOA's refusal to grant a variance was causing significant and unnecessary hardship. Your Honor, Marcus said, Mr. Thompson is not asking the court to override the HOA's authority entirely. He is simply asking for an injunction to stop the daily fines while he pursues a reasonable variance through the proper channels. The HOA has refused to even consider a variance application, despite the clear business necessity and the lack of any aesthetic or structural concerns with the shed itself. Judge Cassidy turned to Gregory Foster. Counselor, does the HOA have a position on this? Foster stood up, straightening his tie. Your Honor, the HOA's position is straightforward. Mr. Thompson violated the community's CC and Articus by building a structure without approval. The rules are clear, and they apply to everyone. If we grant exceptions based on claimed hardship, it would undermine the entire purpose of having rules in the first place. Has the HOA considered granting a retroactive variance? Foster hesitated. Your Honor, the board felt that approving the structure after the fact would set a bad precedent. So the HOA has not actually evaluated the structure itself, or considered whether it meets community standards. You have just refused on principle. Well, Your Honor, the principle is important. We cannot have homeowners building whatever they want and then asking for forgiveness instead of permission. Judge Cassidy leaned back in her chair and looked at the photographs of my shed. Mr. Foster, I am looking at these pictures, and I see a well-constructed outbuilding that appears to be consistent with the aesthetic of the neighborhood. I also see documentation that Mr. Thompson's neighbors have no objections. What exactly is the HOA's concern here? Is it the structure itself, or is it purely about enforcing the rules for the sake of enforcing the rules? Foster looked uncomfortable. Your Honor, rules exist for a reason. If we start making exceptions, I am not asking about hypothetical exceptions. I am asking about this specific case. Does the HOA have any concrete objection to the shed itself, aside from the procedural issue of it being built without prior approval? Foster glanced at Patricia, who was sitting in the gallery behind him. She shook her head slightly, and Foster turned back to the judge. No, Your Honor. The objection is procedural. Judge Cassidy nodded slowly. Here is what I am going to do. I am granting a temporary injunction suspending the daily fines while Mr. Thompson submits a formal variance application to the HOA. The HOA will evaluate that application on its merits, considering the structure's quality, its aesthetic compatibility with the neighborhood, and the legitimate business need it serves. If the HOA denies the variance, they must provide specific, substantive reasons for the denial. They cannot deny it simply because it was built without prior approval. Do I make myself clear, Mr. Foster? Yes, Your Honor. Good. Mr. Thompson, you have 2 weeks to submit a complete variance application. The HOA has 4 weeks from receipt of that application to render a decision. If they deny the application without substantive cause, we will be back here and I will not be pleased. Understood? Yes, Your Honor, I said. Thank you. We left the courthouse and I felt like I could breathe for the first time in weeks. Marcus clapped me on the shoulder. That went well. Judge Cassidy basically told the HOA they were being unreasonable. Now we just need to put together a rock-solid variance application. We spent the next week compiling every possible piece of documentation. Photographs from multiple angles, architectural drawings, engineering reports, neighbor statements, business justification, financial records, everything. Marcus even helped me draft a cover letter explaining the situation and expressing my willingness to make any reasonable modifications to the shed to bring it into compliance with HOA standards. I submitted the application on a Monday morning, hand-delivering it to Patricia Henderson's house to ensure there was no question about receipt. She answered the door, looked at the thick envelope in my hand, and sighed. "Mr. Thompson, you are wasting everyone's time. The judge ordered you to evaluate this application on its merits, Patricia. I am just following the court's instructions." She took the envelope. "The board will review it. You have 4 weeks. I am aware of the timeline." She closed the door in my face. 4 weeks passed. I checked my mailbox obsessively, waiting for the HOA's response. On the 28th day, exactly at the deadline, an envelope arrived. I opened it with shaking hands. The variance was denied. The stated reason was failure to demonstrate that the structure conforms to community aesthetic standards as outlined in Section 7, subsection 2 of the CC and Articles. I read that sentence 3 times, feeling my blood pressure rise. Section 7, subsection 2 dealt with color schemes and roofing materials. My shed had the exact same color scheme as my house: beige stucco walls and terracotta roof tiles. It was identical to every other structure in the neighborhood. The denial was complete nonsense. I immediately forwarded the letter to Marcus. He called me an hour later. "Rob, this is actually good news." "How is this good news?" "They denied my variance." "Yes, but they denied it for a reason that is demonstrably false. You can prove that your shed conforms to the aesthetic standards." Which means we can go back to Judge Cassidy and argue that the HOA is acting in bad faith. This actually strengthens your case. We filed a motion to enforce the injunction and scheduled another hearing for early June. This time, Marcus brought even more evidence, including side-by-side photographs comparing my shed to other structures in the neighborhood, copies of the CC and Articles with Section 7, subsection 2 highlighted, and even an expert opinion from a local architect stating that the shed was fully consistent with community standards. The hearing was shorter this time. Judge Cassidy reviewed the evidence, looked at the HOA's denial letter, and then fixed Gregory Foster with a stare that could have frozen lava. "Mr. Foster, is the HOA seriously arguing that this structure does not conform to aesthetic standards when it is clearly built with the same materials and color scheme as every other building in the neighborhood?" Foster shifted uncomfortably. "Your Honor, the board felt that the structure's size and placement were not consistent with size and placement are not mentioned in Section 7, subsection 2. The denial cites aesthetic standards, specifically color schemes and roofing materials. The evidence clearly shows that the structure complies with those standards. This appears to be a pretextual denial. Your Honor, the board has broad discretion. Broad discretion is not the same as arbitrary decision-making, Mr. Foster. I am finding that the HOA has acted in bad faith by denying this variance without substantive cause. I am hereby ordering the HOA to approve Mr. Thompson's variance and to cease any further enforcement actions regarding the shed. Additionally, I am ordering the HOA to reimburse Mr. Thompson for any fines already collected. Is that clear? Foster looked like he wanted to argue, but he just nodded. Yes, Your Honor. I could hardly believe it. I had won. The shed was staying, the fines were being refunded, and Patricia Henderson's petty enforcement action had been shut down by a judge, We left the courthouse, and Marcus was grinning. That is about as definitive a win as you can get in these cases. Congratulations, Rob. Thank you, Marcus. Seriously, I could not have done this without you. Just send me the bill for my fees and we will call it even. I drove home feeling vindicated but exhausted. The whole ordeal had taken nearly 3 months, cost me thousands in legal fees, damaged my business relationships, and caused me immeasurable stress. All because Patricia Henderson could not stand the idea of someone building a shed without asking her permission first. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 weeks after the court order, I came home from a client site to find my shed's door standing open. I had not left it that way. I walked around back, my heart pounding, and saw that the lock had been forced. Someone had broken into my shed. I stepped inside and felt my stomach drop. The place had been ransacked. Equipment was pulled off shelves, cables were yanked out of racks, and several pieces of hardware were missing entirely. I did a quick inventory and realized that about $15,000 worth of equipment was gone. 2 servers, a high-end networking switch, several diagnostic tools, and various cables and accessories. I called the police immediately. 2 officers from the Scottsdale Police Department arrived within 20 minutes. I showed them the damage and provided a list of the missing equipment. They took statements, photographed the scene, and dusted for fingerprints. "You have any idea who might have done this?" one of the officers asked, a guy named Officer Martinez. "I have a suspicion, but I do not have proof." "What is the suspicion?" I explained the whole HOA situation, the court case, Patricia Henderson's hostility. Officer Martinez raised his eyebrows. "You think your HOA president broke into your shed and stole your equipment?" "I think it is possible. She has been furious about losing that court case." "I would not put it past her." "That is a serious accusation. Do you have any evidence?" "No, just a gut feeling." The officers said they would investigate, but I could tell they were skeptical. Breaking and entering with theft was a serious crime, and accusing a middle-aged HOA president was probably not at the top of their suspect list. I spent the rest of the day dealing with the aftermath. I called my insurance company to file a claim, contacted my clients to let them know about the theft and potential data concerns, and changed all the locks on the shed. I also installed security cameras, which I should have done months ago. 3 days later, I got a call from Officer Martinez. "Mr. Thompson, we found some of your equipment." "You did? Where?" "That is the interesting part. We got a tip that someone was trying to sell high-end server equipment on Craigslist. We followed up and it matched the description of your stolen property. We arrested the seller." "Who was it?" "A 19-year-old kid named Tyler Watts. Says he bought the equipment from someone in a neighborhood near yours. Claims he did not know it was stolen. We are still investigating, but we recovered 2 of your servers and the networking switch." "That is great news. Thank you, officer." "There is more. Tyler gave us a description of the person who sold him the equipment. Middle-aged woman, short blonde hair, driving a silver Lexus SUV. Ring any bells?" My heart started pounding. "That sounds like Patricia Henderson." "That is what we thought too." "We are going to follow up with her. I will keep you posted." 2 days later, Officer Martinez called again. "Mr. Thompson, we brought Patricia Henderson in for questioning. She denied everything at first, but when we told her we had a witness who identified her and that we were checking surveillance footage from the area where the sale occurred, she broke down and admitted to it. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. She admitted to stealing my equipment." "Yes. Apparently, she was so angry about the court ruling that she decided to take matters into her own hands. She thought if she could make the equipment disappear, you would not have a reason to keep the shed anymore. She broke into your shed, took what she could carry, and sold it to this Tyler kid on Craigslist for cash. Then she was planning to report you to the court for not actually having any equipment in the shed, claiming you had made the whole thing up. That is insane. Yeah, well, people do crazy things when they are angry. We arrested her this morning. She is being charged with burglary, theft, and fencing stolen property. Those are felony charges, Mr. Thompson. She is looking at serious prison time if convicted. I sat down heavily in my chair. Patricia Henderson, the woman who had spent months lecturing me about following the rules, had committed multiple felonies because she could not accept losing a court case. What happens now? I asked. The case will go to the district attorney's office. They will decide whether to prosecute. Given that she confessed and we have physical evidence, I would say it is pretty likely she will be charged. You will probably be contacted as a witness. Okay, thank you, Officer Martinez. I appreciate everything you have done. Just doing my job, and Mr. Thompson, you might want to consider getting a restraining order. People like Patricia Henderson do not always give up easily, even when they are facing criminal charges. I took his advice and filed for a restraining order the next day. Marcus helped me with the paperwork, and given Patricia's criminal charges and history of harassment, the judge granted it without hesitation. Patricia was ordered to stay at least 500 feet away from me and my property at all times. The news of Patricia's arrest spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Apparently, I was not the only homeowner who had been on the receiving end of her vindictive enforcement actions. Several neighbors reached out to me, sharing their own stories of petty fines, rejected variance applications, and general harassment. One couple, the Martinezes who lived 3 houses down, told me Patricia had tried to fine them $500 because their mailbox was painted the wrong shade of black. A week after Patricia's arrest, I received a letter from the HOA board. It was signed by Donald Pritchard, who had apparently taken over as interim president. The letter was brief and to the point. Dear Mr. Thompson, on behalf of the Saguaro Springs HOA board, I want to formally apologize for the treatment you received regarding your storage shed. The board has reviewed your case and agrees that the previous enforcement actions were inappropriate and excessive. We are dropping all outstanding issues related to your shed and consider the matter fully resolved. Additionally, the board is conducting a comprehensive review of our enforcement policies to ensure that future disputes are handled more fairly and reasonably. If you have any concerns or questions, please do not hesitate to contact me directly. Sincerely, Donald Pritchard, Interim President. I showed the letter to Marcus, who nodded approvingly. That is what a reasonable response looks like. It is amazing what a difference leadership makes. Over the next few months, things slowly returned to normal. My insurance company reimbursed me for the stolen equipment, and I used the money to replace what had been taken and upgrade some of my systems. I repaired my relationships with my clients, explaining the situation and assuring them that I had resolved the storage issues. Precision Dynamics gave me another chance, and I made sure to never let my response time slip again. I even picked up a few new clients through referrals from satisfied customers. Patricia Henderson's criminal case moved through the court system. She was formally charged with burglary in the 2nd degree, theft, and trafficking in stolen property. Her lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the district attorney was not particularly sympathetic to a middle-aged woman who had abused her position of authority to commit felonies against a homeowner. The case went to trial in September. I was called as a witness and spent a day on the stand explaining the whole saga, from the initial violation notice to the break-in and theft. The prosecutor was a sharp woman named Jessica Ramirez, who did an excellent job of demonstrating that Patricia's actions were not just criminal, but premeditated and vindictive. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Patricia showed no emotion when the verdicts were read, but I could see her hands shaking as the judge set a sentencing date for the following month. At sentencing, Judge Cassidy, the same judge who had handled my injunction case, presided. She listened to statements from Patricia's lawyer about how Patricia had been under stress, how she had served the community for years, how this was out of character. Then Judge Cassidy asked if I wanted to make a statement. I stood up and faced Patricia for the first time since her arrest. She would not meet my eyes. "Your Honor, what Patricia Henderson did to me was not just criminal, it was cruel. She used her position of authority to harass me, to damage my business, and to make my life miserable, all because I built a shed without asking her permission first." When a judge told her she was wrong, she did not accept it. She did not move on. Instead, she broke into my property, stole my equipment, and tried to destroy my livelihood. She showed no respect for the law, no respect for the court's ruling, and no respect for me as a human being. I think that says everything about her character. I am not asking for any particular sentence, Your Honor. I just want to make sure that Patricia Henderson understands that actions have consequences, and that she cannot abuse her power without being held accountable. Judge Cassidy nodded and thanked me. Then she turned to Patricia. "Miss Henderson, you held a position of trust in your community. Homeowners relied on you to enforce the rules fairly and reasonably. Instead, you used that position to pursue a personal vendetta against Mr. Thompson, and when you did not get your way through legal means, you resorted to committing serious crimes. That is unconscionable. I am sentencing you to 3 years in the Arizona Department of Corrections, with credit for time served. Additionally, you are ordered to pay full restitution to Mr. Thompson for all damages, including stolen property, legal fees, and lost business income. After your release, you will be on probation for 5 years, during which time you are prohibited from serving in any HOA leadership capacity. Do you understand?" Patricia finally looked up, her face pale. "Yes, Your Honor." The bailiff led her away, and I left the courtroom feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. I had not wanted to see Patricia go to prison. I had just wanted her to leave me alone. But she had made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. The HOA board, now permanently led by Donald Pritchard, turned out to be much more reasonable. Donald reached out to me a few weeks after Patricia's sentencing and asked if I would be willing to serve on a committee to review and revise the HOA's enforcement policies. I agreed, figuring that maybe I could help prevent future homeowners from going through what I had experienced. We spent several months rewriting the rules, adding provisions for reasonable variances, creating an appeals process, and limiting the board's ability to impose excessive fines. We also implemented a system where neighbors could vote to override board decisions if they felt enforcement actions were unjust. It was not perfect, but it was a lot better than the system Patricia had abused. My business recovered fully. Precision Dynamics renewed their contract, and I even expanded my client base to include several new manufacturing companies in the Phoenix area. The shed continued to serve its purpose beautifully, housing all my equipment in climate-controlled comfort and allowing me to respond quickly to client emergencies. I installed better locks and a full security system, complete with cameras that fed directly to my phone. I never wanted to deal with another break-in. Thankfully, I never did. One afternoon in December, almost a year after the whole ordeal began, I was working in my home office when the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Donald Pritchard standing there with a fruit basket. "Donald, what is this?" He smiled sheepishly. "Just a small token of appreciation, Rob. The board wanted to thank you for all your work on the policy committee. The changes we made have been really positive for the community. We have gotten feedback from a lot of homeowners saying they feel like the HOA is actually working for them now instead of against them." I took the basket, feeling a bit awkward. "Thanks, Donald. I appreciate that. I also wanted to apologize personally for not standing up to Patricia sooner. I knew she was going overboard with your case, but I was too intimidated to say anything. That was cowardly of me, and I am sorry." "You did eventually speak up," I said. "That counts for something." "Maybe. Anyway, I just wanted you to know that we appreciate you, Rob. You stuck to your principles, even when it was hard, and you made this community better. So thank you." After he left, I sat down with the fruit basket and thought about everything that had happened. It had been a hell of a year. I had fought with an HOA president, gone to court twice, had my property burglarized, testified at a criminal trial, and helped rewrite a bunch of bureaucratic rules. It was exhausting just thinking about it. But I had also learned something important. Standing up for yourself matters. Fighting back against unreasonable authority matters. Not everyone has the resources or the stubbornness to take on an HOA in court, and I was lucky that I had a good lawyer and a fair judge. But the principle was universal. When someone abuses their power, you have to push back. If you do not, they will just keep doing it to other people. My shed still stands in my backyard, solid and functional, housing my servers and equipment and allowing me to do my job. Every time I walk past it, I think about Patricia Henderson and her obsessive need to enforce every rule to the letter, no matter the cost. I think about how she ended up in prison because she could not accept losing a court case. And I think about how close I came to just giving in, to tearing down the shed and accepting defeat, just because fighting back seemed too hard. I am glad I did not give in. I am glad I fought back. And I am glad that Patricia Henderson learned, the hard way, that being in a position of authority does not mean you are above the law. The neighborhood is quieter now. The HOA still exists, still enforces rules, but it does so with a lot more common sense and a lot less vindictiveness. Donald has done a good job as president, and the board seems genuinely interested in serving the community rather than ruling over it. I rebuilt my client relationships, and my business is thriving. The storage shed serves its purpose perfectly, and I have never had another problem with it. The security cameras I installed have never caught anything more interesting than an occasional raccoon, and I am perfectly fine with that. Sometimes I see neighbors walking past my house, and they wave or stop to chat. A few of them have mentioned that they heard about what happened with Patricia, and they thank me for standing up to her. Apparently, a lot of people in the neighborhood had been suffering under her tyrannical leadership, and my case was the catalyst that finally brought about change. I do not think of myself as a hero. I just think of myself as a guy who needed a shed for his equipment and refused to be bullied into getting rid of it. But if my stubbornness helped other people, I guess that is a good thing. Patricia Henderson was released from prison after serving 2 years, with good behavior credit. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she moved to a different state, somewhere in Nevada. I hope she learned her lesson. I hope she found a way to channel her need for control into something productive instead of destructive. But honestly, I do not think about her much anymore. She is part of the past, a cautionary tale about what happens when petty authority goes unchecked. My shed is still here, still functional, still serving its purpose. And that, in the end, is all that really matters. I won the fight to keep it, I exposed an abusive HOA president, and I helped make my community a better place to live. It cost me time, money, and stress, but it was worth it. I learned that sometimes you have to fight for what is right, even when it is inconvenient, even when it is expensive, even when it seems easier to just give in. Because if you do not fight, the bullies win. And I was not about to let Patricia Henderson win. The equipment in my shed is still there, humming quietly, keeping my clients' systems running, allowing me to do my job. The shed itself stands as a monument to the principle that homeowners have rights, that rules should be enforced fairly and reasonably, and that abusing authority has consequences. As I sit here in my home office, looking out at the backyard where my shed stands solid and proud, I feel a sense of satisfaction. I fought an unjust system and won. I stood up to a bully and watched her face justice. I turned a personal crisis into an opportunity to improve my community. It was a long road, full of frustration and setbacks. But in the end, it was worth every minute, every dollar, every ounce of stress. Because my shed is still standing, my business is thriving, and Patricia Henderson is no longer in a position to abuse her authority. That is justice. That is victory. And that is why I refuse to back down, no matter how hard Patricia Henderson pushed.